God bless America, yes, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her from the light, from the up above, something like that. From the mountain to the valley, to the ocean, whitewood foam. God bless America, my own sweet home. Hello, everybody. Sirwalterj Jones Show. I'm here. How y'all is? Come on in. The water's still fine. Oh, man, it is the weekend edition. Baby. It's Sunday, for those of you who are watching live. For those of you who are watching later on, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I don't know what day it is. Hopefully, you would have watched this before you went down into the polls and pulled the lever. Some of you already pulled. Well, you did it through the mail or you did something. All right? Congratulations. You were doing something my forefathers, my grandmama, my dear, and pawpaw, they lost their lives over this. The power, the right, the honor to be able to pull that same lever. They died trying to get this done and teach it to their children and their children's children. All right? So, let's talk about this. Why do we vote the way we do? It is something that we do here in America every 2 years faithfully since the Constitution of the United States was, a bunch of John Hancocks put their names on there. No pun intended. I think it's called a Camaro, I think it's called. It's not a car, y'all. It's not a sports car. It is something that was written in the Constitution in the 1787, I believe. And many of you are going by the 1776 date. That's not the proper date to go by. The bicameral is pretty much means two legislative chambers. That's all what it means. And Bernie, you pro-choice all day, every day. All right, well, go ahead and give us whatever you are. All right? It's a bicameral thing. And it is something that we've been doing a long time. All right. There are two houses. There's the House of Representatives and there is the Senate. Understand you've been hearing it a lot, and many of you know what this is all about. But many of your children, hopefully, maybe some of them will watch later on, and those of millennials don't know what this is all about. All they know is Donald Trump, and they know they got to run to the polls to get him out. They don't realize that this is not a presidential election, but some are feeling like it is, so they're running to the polls, and that's fine. At least they, by any means necessary, get them to the polls. The House of Representatives is the lower chamber, and the Senate is the high chamber, what they call it. There's 435 seats in the House of Representatives and about 35 seats in the Senate. Y'all with me? All right? House of Representatives, they serve for 2 years. And so they got a lot of seats to get that has to be looked at, and the Senate serves for about 6 years. Okay, that's the way it is, and that's just the way it is. Okay, right now at the time of this recording, I think there's about 31 seats tossed that's in the Senate. There's about 31 of them suckers. There's a toss up there. And it's going to be kind of difficult, but not impossible for the Democrats to win seats. I'm not a Democrat. I do ascribe to some of their beliefs and the struggle, but I'm not Democrat, nor am I really a Republican, although I was registered as both of them. I'm in the middle. I'm a conservative, actually. I agree on both sides on some things and detest both sides on some things. They're trying to call this a blue wave, and well, it's close enough. It's early enough for us to decide what the weather pattern is going to be. If you have told me that 30 days ago that this would be an overtake of the Democratic. I would tell you, stop thinking that way. It's like the weatherman trying to tell you that it's going to snow in 7 days from now. That's too far, because things can happen between now and 7 days. Well, we got 2 days before we elect, and because some of these polls and these early voters come forth, we kind of now have a good estimate that there could be a blue wave. Still, we don't know, because we thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and that didn't happen. You can't keep your eyes closed to that silent vote. Those people they came out in droves over there, and they live near Cracker Barrel. I believe that after this election happens, there's going to be a lot of recounts as well. I can see that happening. This is just the way it is. There are some battleground states that you need to pay close attention to come Tuesday night and Wednesday. Arizona is one of them. Nevada is another one. Florida is one. And Tennessee is another. Pay close attention to those battleground states. This is where those who really love President Trump. So if the Democrats take some of those states, then, well, you can almost guarantee that here it is. This is an unprecedented midterm election. We haven't seen this in our lifetime. We've seen it in American history before, but we've never seen it in our lifetime. So keep your eye on Tuesday night's runnings of Arizona, Nevada, Florida, and Tennessee. Okay? Yeah, Bernice Williams, I do not trust the polls at all. No, it's just a bunch of hot air when you hear about that stuff. Okay, now here's what's happening. Here's the problem. It's called gerrymandering, and gerrymandering is a word that you will be hearing a lot, or you may be hearing about redistricting or mapping. And the Republicans, both sides are doing it. Believe it or not. Both sides are really doing it. It's just that the Republicans do it more than every year, every couple of years, you hear about the Republicans redrawing districts because they do it out of fear. They do it out of fear. They want you to vote mostly if they think that you're going to vote on their side. When they see their fear, look what's happening down there in Georgia, where there's an African-American woman running for governor, and look down there in Florida where there's an African-American man running. When you get that kind of hype, and then when you see that how many African-Americans have the opportunity to vote, when the numbers as high as it is in Florida, then fear happens. And so the man who's running for the governorship in Florida is also the Secretary of State, which means he's got the power of persuasion in his hands to mingle and mess with that whole district situation, and then gerrymandering happens, right? That could happen in Atlanta as well. In many of the Republican states, gerrymandering will happen. All right, so they do that again because there is a fear. There was a fear that they will lose seats because black and brown people are going to come out in droves, and so what they try to do, they try to block that. We saw that here in Chicago in the 1980s when the first mayor, black mayor, Harold Washington, before he was mayor, I think he was representatives. What was he? Well, anyway, he was running, and they tried to block us. And I remember when I was not old enough to vote, and the police were picking up folks. They were doing all kind of stuff to try to get us to not come out to vote because they know we had a big influence. Thank you, Bernice Williams. He was a congressman, and he won. And then he won again. And after he won again, he only served Well, he didn't serve that long. He died in the office. Had a heart attack right there in the office. So yeah, it's a tough one here. Now, why do we vote the way we do? Yeah, bombed offices. Yeah. Why do we vote? We vote the way we do because of history. We vote the way we do because of race. We vote the way we do because of struggle. Going back to the history of our people, we were voting Republican. That's just the way it was. When we were given the privilege or the right to vote, we voted Republican. The Democratic Party back in the day was the party that gave us a lot of the men and women who were full of hatred. The Ku Klux Klan come from the Democratic Party. Those in the South, they were proponents of slavery, and they also gave us Jim Crow. And then the Whig Party was the party that disbanded because they couldn't get along. They could not. They was fighting over should there be slavery, should there not be slavery, and then in walked this party called the Republican Party. And and they gave us the president Abraham Lincoln. He was the first guy. It's like he started the party in a sense. And they were abolitionists and they were against slavery. One second. He gave us what's called the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay. I'm in between talking to you about this issue and talking to this other group about this issue. It is difficult for me to kind of come back and forth. So we were voting. So we were Republicans, and what they did was the Republicans detested slavery as long as it was a positiveness in the North. It was all about the Industrial Revolution, okay, and I think what happened was they were making good money in the North. So they wasn't really worried about the South and its cotton. You hear about textiles, okay? And so when they started making good money, they wasn't fighting the war against slavery. They really didn't care about it anymore, and so the Republican Party started to become wealthy. You understand? And so as they started to become wealthy, they turned their backs on the slaves in the South. And check your history. All right. Once they turned their backs, slaves and black people did not have a white partnership against this evil thing called slavery, because they were making money. And so the Civil War happened, of course, and then the Emancipation, and then the 13th Amendment, and it goes on and on. Y'all know the history from there. We still, though, were voting Republican because there were still those that were left that were still fighting this fight. You go into the 1900s, the 1920s and 30s, you see a lot of the things that were happening in the South. Although slavery was over, there still was this Jim Crow that was keeping black people down. The Democratic Party was a hardcore party against us, and they were the ones that were slinging us in trees, a strange fruit. there was this subtle cross that happened like Manasseh and Ephraim when their grandfather was blessing him. He took his hands and he did this. Well, that's what happened to the Republican Party. Okay? This happened. The Republicans became the Democrats and the Democrats became the Republicans. There was 1929, the stock market crash. And I think that right there woke up things, and we began to see a shift then. A lot of people think the shift happened in the 60s. No, that happened in 29. I believe that. With politics, and President Roosevelt came into the office and then began to implement these plans and these programs for relief, which was an advantageousness for those who were poor, who were not making all that money in the Republic, but it was programs for relief. Now, those who were of the part of the Republican Party who were wealthy, they were losing money as well in the stock market, and many people lost everything, and they were jumping out of windows and committing suicide, because it's difficult for wealthy people to see now. One day, some of them were born with a silver spoon. That's all they know is wealth, and then everything's gone. And many of them didn't know how to handle that, and so they would rather kill themselves than to live like poor people. It's a shame. Roosevelt began to implement these programs, and then some black people began to jump ship. Not all of them. They still was faithful to the Republican Party. And I believe it wasn't until the 1960s, I believe after the election of Kennedy, that more and more blacks began to vote Democratic. And I think then they all jumped in 64 after the Civil Rights Bill of Lyndon Baines Johnson. Okay? But whatever party your mama and daddy was then, that's the party you voted for. And that's why many of us still vote for Democrats, because that is the party of the culture. And many times we are just as tribal as the Republicans are. Those who voted for Donald Trump, you look at his rallies, they're tribal. They are mesmerized by this man and his deception. They're mesmerized. It's a cult in a sense. It's really like a cultic church worship service when he walk in the room, and they go into worship mode. A lot of Democrats are the same way when they do that towards Obama. So we vote the way we do because of the culture that we live in, and because of depending on what that party is doing for us, even though that party could be causing us to stay in poverty. It breeds a culture of poor people and impoverished people. I believe the Democratic Party has helped keep people impoverished, because they keep giving people fish and not teaching them how. And then you can see the immorality that have gone through the party, through abortions and gay marriage. And so we who are Christians, we turn our eye and ears, and we turn our cheeks to that stuff, because we want the opportunity to share in the Democratic Party tend to put together these programs to continue to do it for those who are poor, through programs to help those who are in need. But with that, sometimes bills are passed, and there are rider clauses that are in there, and the things that we don't read and really care for. We just want what we want, so we vote for that party because we want what we want. All right, and so a lot of poor people get things from the Democratic Party, and they like it, and so they continue even though there's something about the party that they may disagree with, especially those who are religious, those who are Pentecostals, those who believe in the scriptures, against that which is immoral, they would still vote that party because there are some things that the party is giving them, and they would just put up with that, the immoralities of it. So we stay in that party because of that. We don't vote our conscience. We vote for our assets. That's the way it is. So that's who those who are Democratic and those who are Republican do the same thing. The biggest fight for the Republican Party right now is that which is immigration reform. Every time you hear about someone coming over to the border, it shakes up the Republican Party. They're afraid. They're afraid that they're going to lose out on a few things. They're going to lose their jobs. And the Mexicans are going to take that, whomever's coming over, but it's usually the Hispanics, the jobs, and they're afraid that there's fear-mongering going on in that party as well, because they're afraid that somebody will lose their lives. They keep bringing up this man who murdered a few people, and he was over here illegally, so they're afraid, and they bring up MS-13, and so that's going on. And then there's the fear of Social Security, going to lose this when they get to retirement age, you're going to lose it to these people. It goes on and on. So immigration is the number one fear of Republicans, and not so much jobs and taxes and all that stuff. Okay, they talk a little bit about that, but it's all about immigration. The same way they got here, now they said, now we're here now, close the borders. We in here. And so these people they're escaping tyranny, actually. These people are escaping tyranny, and they want the borders closed. And they'll tell you that they want reform to the immigration, and they want the people to come over here properly. They want to do the proper channels. That's what they say. But I believe in my heart of hearts, that's really not what they want. They really don't want that. They don't want them over here at all. They feel that there's enough of them over here, and the ones who are over here cause them problems. And they're saying that these people, look at them, they all on public aid, but when you look at the statistics, there are more white people on public aid than there are minorities. That's just the way it is, all right? So there's problems in both parties. When I lived in South Dakota, I voted Republican because I was around a lot of Republican people. I was in a Republican state. I began to get caught up in the cloud of my brothers and sisters over there who had issues with some things, and so I got caught up in it. So you vote depending on where you live. What you saying? Steve says we vote as we saw our parents did. Yep, pretty much like the church we choose to attend. That's right, Stephen Perry. We vote because that's the way our parents were, because we don't come to a place to where we have our own minds. We still live in our parents' minds. That's the way we are. We live still in our parents' homes up here. We are our parents. There's a funny commercial. I don't know. What is it, an insurance company or something? They said we are our parents, and these men and women are acting like their parents. Is it Prudential? I don't know. So we vote the way our parents vote. The millennials are showing us differently, though. And I think that break away from the parents, from weaning up under the parents, that happened under the millennials. It didn't happen so much under Generation X. The silent generation voted Republican. Those are ones from World War I and II. And then the baby boomers of the 1950s, many of them, they voted Republican. This is the way it was. And again, and it wasn't until the 60s when they decided to start voting the Democrat, and they stayed voting the Democrats from the 1960s, 70s. In the 1960s, the Generation Xers were born, and they voted Democrat Party. It didn't matter what was going on, and they did that. And as you see the decades go further and further, you start seeing something happening with white evangelicals. White evangelicals did not go out to vote. They because they felt that it wasn't really the fight over abortion was a Catholic fight. They didn't really care about that, and they really didn't care about African Americans and the struggle of Jim Crow. They really didn't care about that either. That wasn't their fight either. So they kept quiet on that. what we call white silence. And what they did was they built their schools in the South, and they took care of themselves in the South. They left the areas of the urban areas. Black people came. There was a black migration that came to the northern cities from the South, and they began to settle in Detroit and New York and Chicago and the Midwestern territories, and they began to move in the neighborhoods where white people were, and the white people moved out. So it was what they call white flight. The great black migration turned into a white flight. So when I moved into my neighborhood in the 1960s, there were only maybe about 2 or 3 white people left, and they began to sell their homes to black people. And they moved to the suburbs, and they built their suburban life there and closed the gate. And then they put the wall there, and then you got the housing situation, what they call redlining. That's a whole little economical teaching that I've done those teachings before. All right, we stayed in these neighborhoods from the 1960s and then the 70s and then the 80s, and what happened was the neighborhoods began to fall down. The houses were falling up on us and began to crumble. Why? Because the wealth transfer did not happen the way it happened with our parents. Our grandparents transferred their wealth from the 1940s and 50s to their children in the 1960s, and then they continued in they had good job security. My grandmother worked on a job for 35 years. You see, that's the way it was back then. They worked on their jobs until they retired, and then they passed down their assets to their children, and then they kept the homes up. And they had a good nest egg and good insurance policies and what have you. Well, what did that do? That was good, but then they began to transfer the wealth over to the Generation Xers, but the Generation Xers was not given the same type. Things began to happen in the country where the Generation Xers got confused and distracted by the type of medium that we had, with the toys that we had, and we were more worldwide. There wasn't an internet yet, but yet there was. We began to get this 24-hour cable television and pop culture change, and it just caused us to be a little more distracted and focused on what the party was doing to keep us in a slum-like manner. So when the wealth transfer, some of the parents decided not to transfer the wealth for fear of losing, and those who did transfer the wealth, they died off or got too old, and then the Generation Xers put that parent into an old folk home, which I'll call it, and then the houses crumbled. Well, what happened? The white folks sat back a while and allowed the houses and the properties to crumble because they knew they were coming back to reclaim them. And what's it called? That's gentrification. So now you're seeing the major cities where you used to see slum-like, you used to see a whole bunch of black people. Now you see a sprinkle of salt in the pepper. Up and down my community, a lot of these homes, they put X's on them because they've been abandoned, and the bulldozers are coming in every month and tearing them down, and now they're vacant lots. Why? Because they're coming. They're coming, all right? Because they're waiting for it to crumble so they can come in and rebuild and reclaim it. And that's what's happening, all right? So you continue to vote your culture, Democrat Party. You keep go ahead and keep doing that. That's fine. But to change your party and vote Republican ticket can be a problem as well, because when you look at their conventions, it's all white. It's really hard to find a black face amongst them. And what we've done was we got mesmerized by our television networks, MSNBC, mostly a Democratic plant, okay? CNN wants to be in the middle, but they're mostly Democrat as well. And Fox News, of course, is a Republican plant. So when you look at those stations, you see the banter is the same. Blessings to you, bro Bass. I'm doing good, pretty good. So the language is the same. You turn on Fox News, 95 or more % of the time, it's about Republican Party on the positive side. They praise Donald Trump, and when he gets on the stage, he often talk about Fox News in a positive light. When he talk about fake news, he'll let you know that ain't Fox News. It's those other it's every station other than Fox. So when we watch these stations, we get caught up in this banter. All right, there is good talk on both sides, but unfortunately, there's too much negative on both sides. We're in a really rough time, y'all. It's bad. It's really bad out here for everybody. It's bad. What's going to happen Tuesday is you're going to make a vote for the man or woman who you think is for that office. And there might be a blue wave Tuesday. It might be, or not. The thing about that is, whether there is a blue wave or whether the Republicans stay in their office and they keep the control of the Congress, it really doesn't matter. The more things change, the more they stay the same. America still is the divided states of America. There's nothing that's going to change. In these late years, I have become independent, listening to the issues of each candidate. Yep, same here, mother. Same here. The way I'm going to vote Tuesday is when I walk in there, they're going to ask me Republican or Democrat, and I'm going to say independent. And they're going to give me my independent ticket, and it's going to take me longer than the rest of the people. Most of the people in my district will say Democratic, and they're going to go one level one time and they out of there. If that was the way you vote. All right, I may spend some time in there because even though I'm one guy, I like to vote my conscience, and maybe my one vote don't count. But in this election, it has more power than the presidential election, because when you vote for president, it's really about not the Congress, it's about the college. It's really about the Electoral College more so than the popular vote, because as you can see, Donald Trump didn't win the popular vote. The other lady did. Well, the lady did. But America still lost. So you went in there and you voted for a lady more than the guy, but you still didn't get the lady. You understand what I'm saying? So your vote is not as don't have as much strength as this one do. It's like those of you who are in credit reporting. I know credit reporting quite well because I teach on it. You may have something on your credit report that might be years old. It could be a tax lien. It could be child support. It could be something that was on there for 10, 15, 20. It could be a Chapter 7 or something, a bankruptcy or something like that. But your credit score is, let's say, 600. Those bad things on the credit don't have the hard weight on your score. All right? It doesn't. After so many years, it's not pulling on your score as much. If you got 600 and then a bankruptcy hits today, that score gonna go way down. You're gonna lose big time, 50, 60, 70 points. Shoot! But because that bankruptcy has been on there for years, it don't affect the score as much. No. And that's what's happening with your vote. It don't have as much weight in the presidential election, because when the chips are down, when it's all done, and the ballots are tallied up, what do? They call the college and say, okay, how y'all voting? And they say, we don't care about the Americans. Here how we voting, and that's how Donald Trump got in there. But this one right here, there is no electoral college. No. Every ballot is counted. And you're counted. It is the most important election of your lifetime. And this election alters the power of the guy in office. All right? Understand this. Most of you ignore the midterm elections because it's just congressmen, senators, and House of Representatives being voted. It doesn't really matter. And that's the dumbest thing you can ever say, because we live in a country of what's called checks and balances. You got to understand that. And that executive branch have some executive privileges that can affect you. Right? It's his privilege, and Congress can't touch his privilege because it's called an executive privilege. He do what he want to within reason of allotment of privilege. Get that? All right? And he can do what he almost want to with them troops, except he can't declare war. But he can send those troops to places that you may not want to, and Congress may not want to, but he's got the right to do it. You get what I'm saying? So, outside of his privilege, there are things that he can't do. Congress have to approve it. Here's where you come in. Because you ignore the midterm election, but you got the power to put a guy or woman in there who can tell the president no. You see what I'm saying? But you ignore that election where you have more power over. And these elections put in governors and local officials and secretaries of states and all kinds of stuff. This election is extremely important because then it affects you directly. Your house, your tax bracket, your health care, all this. Because look what happened. When it came time for them to try and get rid of Obamacare, who did it? Who attacked it? These people that's in the office right now who you're getting ready to put back in or take out. They're the ones that voted on altering this Obamacare, which was a benefit for many of you. Now, some people hate Obamacare because it was horrible for them. But for many of you, it was a positive thing. And so people say the Congress ain't doing nothing. Okay, true. It seemed like they wasn't doing anything during the Obama years, right? That's true. They wasn't passing no votes, nothing like that. But that lazy Congress during the Obama years, the power that they had was they held up a Supreme Court justice. You decided not to vote during that midterm of Barack Obama. Every president who gets in office got to kick butt for 2 years. Why? Because of the midterm. Whatever the president do in his first 2 years can weaken him his next 2 years, the latter 2 years. That's why it's difficult for a president to get re-elected. It's hard because he's got to kick butt the first 2 years, and what that does is that causes a shift in Congress, depending on what he do in 2 years, causes a shift in Congress. And if he regained Congress in the first 2 years, the possibility of him being reelected is high. Am I educating anybody here? Okay? It's high because of you. So you went out there and voted for a president. Your vote was weak. The president get in there. George Bush, I believe, lost the popular vote. Remember? So the judges had to get involved. Bush versus called Bush v. Gore. The judges had to get involved to settle that fight. Well, guess what? Who put the judges, or who confirms the judges? Congress. You see how this is? You see how this working? Checks and balances. You're like, we don't worry about judges. Okay. It's time to vote for a president. Okay, we voted. But we voted popular for this guy. Yes. But that college. I don't understand. But why do we go to the voting house? Okay, all right. Let's do this then. Let's do a recount. The recount, we're still. Well, let's go to the judicial board, which is those 9 people sitting. Okay, who are these 9 people? Well, remember that midterm election where you decided not to vote? Yeah. Well, that president who you tried to vote for, or you did vote for, and he won or he didn't win, okay, this new guy in there selected a guy to sit on the Supreme Court. Well, then the Congress who you decided not to vote for confirmed that guy who you didn't like. Really? Yeah. Now he's sitting among the 9, and now the new president, the new guy who's running, it didn't get the popular vote. But now this new guy who you don't like, who you didn't vote for Congress, but now he's in there. Now he has the vote to get this new man in office. Now he president, the man you don't like, you didn't vote for, but he now president, George Bush. You see how this works? You see how important voting is? Did I help y'all out here? It's a circus, but it is one of the greatest democracies we have. It is one of the greatest systems we have. It's checks and balances. You don't write a check and there's no money in the bank. You don't do that. Okay? You don't. Hopefully you balance your checkbook prior to you writing the check. Because now when you look at the back, nobody does it anymore. You look in the back where the balance sheet on your checkbook says, I've got $300 in the bank. Now I can write this check for this item. Well, that's the United States. The president can't just say whatever he wants to without he checking the paperwork. Say, wait a minute, can I do this? And who do we do? What do we do? He called the judicial people, and the judicial people says, all right, we have to uphold the Constitution. Your job is to protect it and uphold it, you president. Our job is to interpret it. We who are the judicial board, we interpret it. So the buck don't really stop at the president. The buck stops at the judge's house. You see what I'm saying? So this election is extremely important because when you vote in this election, you vote for a man or woman in Congress who, when the president who you don't like decide to replace this woman who getting ready to resign or possibly die, God help her to live longer. If she this judge who decides she's done, this guy who you don't like gonna select another person like a Kavanaugh to serve, and because you didn't vote Tuesday, these people who you didn't vote for will confirm this next guy who could have possibly raped or molested a woman, and now we got another one sitting in the office, sitting on that bench for life. Are y'all convinced yet that voting is extremely important, especially right now? How convinced are you? Are you convinced yet? This vote is extremely important because it is what my co-host called the fortune of failure. It's the fortune of failure, and ignorance is lucrative. So if you don't understand anything I said, vote. Just vote. You'll understand it in 2 years. Within 2 years, you will understand how important your vote is. So here's what I suggest you do. Go online and Google who's running. Just Google it. Who's running in my area? Who's running for Congress and Senate? Who's running for governor? Who's running for mayor? Who's running? Google. Find out what their record is. Don't just go down and start pulling levels because their name sounds cute. Find out what their record is. And then say, okay, I got it. Write it down if you have to. Okay, I got that. Okay, all right, got it. When you go to the polls, you vote what's right for the nation. And then, even if they lost, you got a good conscience. You can walk out there and says, yeah, but I got a good conscience. I'm going to keep the fight. But aren't they all just men, and them or rep, they have their faults? It is the fortune of failure. Yeah, they do have their faults. We're not voting in prophets and evangelists or apostles. We're not doing that. No. But the scriptures are quite clear on who we should pray for as well. Pray for those kings and leaders and potentates and what have you. He says, because so that you might lead, L-E-A-D, a peaceable life. All right? So apparently they're important to God as well. Romans chapter, 13, 14? Which one is it? It talks about these people in leadership. Oh, yeah. You still got to obey the laws of the land, and you have to render to Caesar what Caesar's. I'm glad I am neutral based on Matthew 6:9. Jermaine, Daniel 2 and 44. I think people are starting to know, but they have 58 hours to really learn. Yep. Bright? Yes. Yeah, they got 58 hours. They can do it. Y'all, some of y'all are in school, you're online school. Some of y'all study this and that. You study your poetry and you study music. You all study stuff. Y'all, whatever you want, you're going to study it. So why don't you study this? This is democracy. This could affect you forever. Our people perish. Yes. 48 hours. Yep. The separation of church and state. Yeah. So that we may live at peace. Come on, Bright. You better. Are you preaching this with me? I'm trying to get out of here. I got to go. I'm trying to listen to this other show. I pay taxes based off of Romans chapter 13 for civil duties. Come on, Jermaine. That's what I'm talking about. This election is for your supporting cast. Yeah. The people put in place during this election is to ensure your agenda and views for the nation. Ooh, Amber Rogers. You kind of smart. You're poquito. But you're smart. She gonna get me. Or I'm gonna get an inbox message. We still need to live today and be honorable to God and His laws. That's right. Live today. Vote today. If this is Tuesday, vote today so that you can live peaceably tomorrow. What's that song? Land that I love, stand beside her and guide her from the light, from the up above. What's the words? From the mountain, the valley, ocean, whitewood foam. Whitewood foam. Y'all ever seen the ocean? It look like y'all washing clothes. Y'all know the foam that happens in your wash machine? I used to sit there when I was a little kid and wash that foam because y'all put too much detergent in there. Well, that's what's happening in some of our oceans. Go down to Lake Michigan. You'll see it. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Yeah. You know, it's good to be a part of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Make America great again? And America's been great a long time. These little dog whistles that you hear from certain parties, those are the dog whistles. Don't worry about the dog whistle. You made America great. As long as you're still breathing, America is great because you here and you are part of God's children. You're the body of Christ. And He has His remnants here in America for a reason. He has not wiped us out. Why? Because His children are here. That's what makes America great. We here. And we're living peaceably as long as we continue to pray. But if you ain't living peaceably, it's because you ain't praying. And you pray for these people from Donald Trump on down. You keep praying for their minds, okay? Keep praying that God will continue to speak to their hearts. When you stop doing that, they will do and say whatever they want to do because you ain't praying as a collective force. You pastors out there, teach the saints how to pray for our leaders. Teach them. Teach them. The Jews were up under Roman rule. They had to pray too for Sanhedrins and the Roman councils. Okay? For, who was that? Pontius Pilate. Okay? You had to pray for those emperors. Constantine. It's important. Vote. God, I thank you for your presence. I thank you for your blood. I thank you for your deliverance. I thank you for your love. You are a great God. You are a great God. And we bow down and worship you because you are God. We love you And we will continue to pray for these people who are running, those who get in or those who leave. It's their choice, but we're not going to stop praying for them. We pray for our nation, and we continue for the peace of Jerusalem as well. Your heart and your attention is there. We know that. So we'll continue to give Jerusalem the support that they need as you lead and guide us to do so. We don't agree with everything that Israel is doing right now, but we will continue to support and pray for them as you give us the wisdom on what to do and how to take care of them. Thank you, God, and we love you. In Jesus' name, amen, everybody, amen. I pray for God's kingdom government based off of Matthew 6, 9, and 10. Came in late, but glad to be here. Go Stacey Abrams. All right, Brentic. Amen. Those of you who in Atlanta, Georgia, I know y'all out there voting. Oprah done knocked on y'all's doors. Can you imagine opening the door and it's Oprah? And then you getting upset because she didn't say, you get a car. She just said, vote. How upset were you? Okay, so I know Atlanta is voting like them lines gonna be so long Tuesday. It's gonna be an amazing day though, if she did win. And in Florida, it would be an amazing day for us. Now, I will do a show on that because there's some facts that happen when African Americans win office. Some facts that happen that we need to take a lesson from the Barack Obama years. I need you to know that don't get excited when a black man or woman win in office and then you sit back and do nothing still. Don't do that, because you don't do your children like that. All right? They eat today until you say, okay, I fed them, so they ain't got to eat no more. They get in office. Now, don't just sit back and say, we got one in there, we good to go. That's what y'all did with Barack Obama. What am I talking about? I'll do another show on that, because there's some unfortunate statistics that happens when an African American is in office. Detroit, Michigan. Did I say Detroit, Michigan? I'm sorry. I meant to say Washington, D.C. Did I say Washington, D.C.? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say these places. I got to go before I get in more trouble. I love y'all with the love of Jesus. Bye. Hit the share button. Bye-bye. If you're on YouTube, hit the bell. Ding. Bye-bye.